colonizing the moon. Is it racist? 2, RUSSIAGATE and Jeffrey Epstein with investigative reporter Mike Benz. 3, update. The ever-moving story of Dildogate in the WNBA. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, set a reminder, and join us every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. If it doesn't fit your schedule that day, no worries. Just head over to Spotify and Apple and hit subscribe. Welcome to Will Cain Country, where today we're welcoming you into 5505 Magnolia. If you'll step this way, you can see the kitchen has been reappointed. Brand new dishwasher and refrigerator. And wait till you see the proportions of the master bedroom. Two-a-days Dan, Tinfoil Pat joining us here today, who have said that I look like today I'm a real estate agent ready to host an open house.
You do.
It is a little bit spot on.
Yeah,
True.
I can see your picture on the back
today,
of a,
so I have
a bench.
It is. I have an event today, and I needed to dress up, so I threw on the sport coat. I got some khakis, and you really cut me to my core 2 days right away when you said you look like you're about to host an open house, and I was like, I do actually.
It's a good look.
I do.
It's a good look. It's just a real estate look.
Is it?
Well, it's very important that you get the terminology correct, because it's no longer master bedroom, just FYI.
Wow.
It's a good point.
Damn.
Thank you. What is it? What is it called? You're right. It's not. Is it the primary bedroom?
I think it's primary.
What do you say instead of master bedroom?
I believe it's primary now.
Well,
Damn soft.
2 days hit me right
Sorry, bud.
squarely in the insecurity. But, insecurity is a good place to start, because John Cena, WWE's John Cena, was talking about something that most men share as an insecurity: hair loss. Listen.
When I'm trying to hide my hair loss, the audience is just bringing it to light of you're going bald. I used it as a thing because of the point in the story we were in. Just because I also want the audience to know that I see your signs, the one that says the bald John Cena, I get it. But I also know it's something I'm going through. I want to be genuine with that audience, letting me know that hey, either do some work or shave your head. And they pushed me into going to see what my options were.
And John Cena got a hair transplant. I'm fascinated by this topic, and I understand that I come at this topic from a place of privilege. It's not something that I have had to deal with, but the vast majority of men do. I think it's 70 to 80% of men deal with hair loss. What I'm fascinated by is both the insecurity due to hair loss that afflicts men and the lack of science's ability to yet solve hair loss. John Cena, to talk about this with People magazine, is something that you won't hear many dudes openly embrace. They won't talk about their hair loss. We could walk through together the list of celebrities who've had hair transplants, but among them, the number who've admitted would be a fraction. No. Never addressed the hair transplant. My favorite example of this is a guy that I think is awesome. Love it when he's in a movie, but I think it's unimpeachable that somewhere around 20 years ago, Matthew McConaughey had the best that is offered on the market.
Really?
He had an amazing hair transplant. See, everybody's blown away by that.
I didn't know that.
Just look it up. Look up Matthew McConaughey circa 2000, 2001, 2002, and look him up today. Hair doesn't grow back like that. I mean, I don't know how much minoxidil he'd have to be ingesting, but that is some superior work done. And I also find it fascinating that science hasn't seemed to solve this, because you could be a billionaire if you could solve male hair loss. Like, honestly, I don't know what would make you richer as a scientist? Curing cancer or curing hair loss? Never underestimate the power of vanity. Look at the booming market for GLP-1s. Look at the booming market for Ozempic. And I'm not here to say there's something wrong with vanity. Vanity can push you in some really healthy directions. But how have they not figured this out? And maybe, in fact, they have. Have you ever seen the lines at Turkish airports of dudes with their heads wrapped in bandages? For some reason, they've, this is a fascinating stat that I've always... Is it cheap or are they good?
It's cheap.
See, one of the things people don't know, do you know who leads the world, like one of the world's leaders? I'm not saying they're number one, but one of the world's leaders in transgender surgery is? Iran.
Really?
What? Iran, yes. Iran is one of the world's leaders in transgender surgeries, and they embrace transgenderism to such an extent. It's a real issue on whether or not they have men participating in women's sports at the international and Olympic level, because they also cover up, like, a lot. So, like, the Iranian women's national soccer team is covered up ankle to wrist. But there's a large suspicion that a lot of those players are actually men. And the reason that it's embraced in Iran is that homosexuality is a crime. So they push homosexuals toward becoming women.
Wow.
Thus becoming one of the world's leader in transgender surgery. So I don't know how to explain it, though, how hair transplants have come to be dominated in Turkey. It could be, as you point out, two-a-days, simply economics. But I am shocked at this point that we don't have this solved. But I really, really, actually, it makes him so endearing. It makes me like him even more, John Cena, that he's willing to talk about his insecurity. And I thought about that when I heard President Trump yesterday announcing a new $600 billion deal investment in the United States of America from Apple. Tim Cook was at the ceremonies yesterday at the White House, and here is what was said about Tim Cook by President Trump.
I want to thank Tim Cook. He's a great, great man, a visionary, a businessman, just about every quality he can have other than athleticism. I don't know about that. I'm looking at him. I'm not 100% sure about you. You're a good athlete. I'll bet you're pretty good. I think he's good at everything, but I want to thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you, sir.
It's hilarious. It's such... I know that President Trump is self-aware. I just don't know how much every line is intentional, like how much of that is unintentional comedy. I know that it's stream of consciousness. So I don't think he goes out there with, I'm going to hit Tim Cook squarely in the insecurities. But, like, I don't know if most men, a high percentage of men, would not... Like, if you list the things that you hope the president does not say about you in an introduction, your lack of athleticism is probably pretty high on the list. He's good at everything except athleticism. And then President Trump realizes what an insult it might have been and tries to reel it back in. I don't know. He's pretty good at everything. He's probably a pretty good athlete. Tim, you're amazing, man. You're so smart. You're just a doofus physically. But no big deal because, look, you're rich, you're smart, you're amazing at everything. You just would hope that wouldn't be what the president highlights, your lack of athleticism. But that's a way to start the show today, talking about mine, John Cena, and Tim Cook's insecurities. Let's get to the news today with story number 1. A CNBC host, in talking about technology and the future of humanity, has broached the topic of whether or not expanding our footprint to the moon would be bad, maybe racist. Yet another example in the long line of the failed experiment of colonization. And we've heard something similar to celebrity faux intellect, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
If we want to keep growing a population, or if we want to live forever, all right, we're going to need another planet.
So is that the moon? Because I
don't want to live on the moon.
Right? Will it serve as a functional life source eventually for human beings? And B, we know how the age of colonialism worked on this planet. Should we be trying to colonize and saying that there's a keep-out zone that not other countries can participate in having?
Well, the real problem with the colonization history in Western civilization is that there were people already there. Right? There are no moon beings that were displaced.
As far as we know. As far as we know.
That is Mad Libs anchoring. That is stupid, dumb, catchphrase, cliched thinking, given a prominent role on a national broadcast. I've heard the word colonization, and colonization is bad, and now we're talking about colonizing the moon. Therefore, it must be bad to colonize the moon. And it's stupid from start. First of all, colonization is not bad. So let's erase the Mad Libs all the way until we have nothing written in any of the blank spaces. You will not be awarded your vowels. If this is Wheel of Fortune, you don't get A, E, I, O, and U. Colonization was good. Almost every country across the globe that was colonized by Western civilization is and was the better for it. That doesn't mean it was perfect or went off without a hitch, but give you India, give you various countries in Africa, and those that are colonized, are better for the values, the technology, and the economics that were brought to them by Western civilization. Period. Full stop. End of story. Colonization was good from Western civilization. So no matter what's being taught in 8th grade Western humanities, no matter what's being taught at Ivy League colleges, reject the premise. Ask the questions. Why was it bad? Oh, well, there was hierarchical societies, sometimes based upon race, that inflicted terrible ills on these countries. True, true, true. But it's a bit like going to watch the best movie of the year, the absolute best movie of the year, and being the guy that sits back and go, I'm not sure the lighting was right on that scene in the third act. The cinematography was just a tad bit off. At some point, you're not intellectual or interesting. You're a douche. The movie itself was amazing. The best movie of the year. And the best period of humanity is the advent of Western civilization. The ills and the problems that came along with Western civilization and its colonization of the rest of the world are the lighting problems on a movie that won the Oscar. Douglas Murray has been on this program, and he has talked about the fact that, in truth, colonization was the first anti-racist movement. Anti-racism. That was colonization by Western civilization. Why? How could that be? That's the antithesis of what we're taught. Here's why. Because the premise of colonization wasn't that you are of a different race, you are of a different skin color, you're incapable of learning, adopting, or profiting from my cultural advancements. No, in fact, I'd like to share them with you, and I have full confidence you'll be able to adopt them. When those values, by the way, were adopted, what did we see? Technological advancement, longer lifespans, health care. These are objectively good things brought to these countries. Transportation, commerce, literally curing disease. And the premise was, these are not above your reach. These are not simply the sole province of the white man, of Europe. No, instead we want to export and share these great things that we've discovered with your culture. That's the original anti-racism. But playing the Mad Libs game of stupidity on CNBC requires you to just simply say, bad colonization, and then transport that stupid thought all the way to the uninhabited moon. And by the way, the point of inhabiting the moon is to progress humanity. In the most dystopian examples, save humanity. But because colonization is bad, maybe we should put the future of humanity on hold until, I don't know, they get rockets in Ghana? So we shouldn't colonize the moon until everyone can colonize the moon. We shouldn't save humanity until we can be assured that we can walk hand in hand to the moon with Uzbekistan. You got to do better, CNBC. You got to do better, 8th grade humanities. You got to do better, critical thinker. Colonization was good. Speaking of popular thought, I want to show you a list of public officials, public figures in America and their favorability ranking. Who do you think's the most unpopular man in America? I know where you went. I know where your brain is. But the answer is no. It's not Donald Trump. In fact, the most unpopular man in America right now is Elon Musk with a negative 28% favorability rating, followed by Benjamin Netanyahu at 23%, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump then tied at negative 16, Pete Hegseth tied with Gavin Newsom at negative 12. Who's the most favorable newsmaker across the world? It's Pope Leo the 14th, plus 46, followed by Pope Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine at plus 18%. Bernie Sanders comes in third at plus 11, and Emmanuel Macron comes in at minus 4. I'm not sure I trust these favorability rankings coming out of Gallup. It's simply, I don't know, similar to asking whether or not Stephen Colbert deserves a top 3 spot in comedy. It's acceptable. It seems mainstream. It's anything but a reflection of America. Saying Elon Musk or Pete Hegseth are some of the most unpopular men in the world seems acceptable, seems mainstream, but I think is anything but when it comes to America. Let's talk about RUSSIAGATE, the hoax, and Jeffrey Epstein with investigative reporter Mike Benz when we come back on Will Cain Country. Ireland. I went viral in Ireland for telling the truth about crime in Dublin and its correlation to mass migration. Saying something in America that they wouldn't say inside the media in Ireland. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. We hope you will subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Mike Benz is the executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. He's a former official with the U.S. Department of State, and he joins us now. What's up, Mike?
How you doing, Will? Great to see you.
I'm doing well. It's good to see you as well. You have been all over some of the stories that we will and will not talk about in our public discourse. Let's start with the one that really honestly hasn't been talked about much, at least in the acceptable mainstream corners of the conversation, and that is the entire hoax perpetuated on the American public of whether or not the 2016 election was influenced to place into power Donald Trump by Russia. The revelations coming from Tulsi Gabbard, and now an order to impanel a grand jury from Attorney General Pam Bondi has pushed this along into at least some corners of American consciousness. But in the mainstream media, Mike, it's still ignored. It's still seen as a hoax, and it's still dismissed as Russian disinformation. Tell me how big you think this story is about the hoax and RUSSIAGATE.
I think it's going to be with us for all 4 years of this presidency. And the fact is RUSSIAGATE permanently changed the fabric of American society. The second order and third order effects of this hoax were, they totally warped our universities. Harvard University, Yale, Princeton, Berkeley, MIT, they all got tens of millions of dollars from the federal government to study the scourge of Russian interference and Russian hacking and Russian influence on social media. Our military contractors got tens of millions of dollars to build technologies to counter this phantom threat that never existed. Our NGOs got tens of millions of dollars to go after this threat and build resilience and counter strategies and mitigation and risk mitigation strategies for something that never existed. The media, the courts, the universities, it all got changed. We have entire government agencies that exist now because of this hoax. CISA at DHS, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, was created because of the hoax idea that Russia had hacked the DNC election servers, when we now know that CrowdStrike, who the FBI relied on to make that determination, had no evidence that they did so. And yet we still have CISA getting hundreds of millions of dollars a year from taxpayers to take on a threat that never existed. You can say the same about entire university departments, hundreds of them across the country, across entire beats. How many journalism beats exist about Russian disinformation, which never existed before 2016 and only existed because of this beat? We've created a kind of war economy over a false flag non-war. And the people who are responsible for dragging us into that non-war are the same ones who are responsible for dragging us into actual wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who played very curious roles in the lead up to that, I should note, including John Brennan, Bob Mueller, the head of the FBI at the time, John Brennan, who was the chief of the CIA station house that was doling out visas to terrorists in Saudi Arabia. It's the same crew, and I think finally now there's an opportunity to bring them to justice.
You know, you talking about how it flipped on its head, that the deep state infrastructure, but driven by the Democrat Party and the ideology of the left, went from, and this is what strikes me, the timeline of this. In 2012, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama stood on a presidential debate stage and were asked their greatest foreign policy concern. Mitt Romney answered, Russia. Barack Obama's rebuttal to that became a punchline. The
1980s called, they want their foreign policy back.
That's right, Mike. Barack Obama responded, Russia. The 1980s have called and they want their foreign policy back. He was dismissive of the nefarious capabilities of Russia. 3 years later, Russia is the world's supervillain that has totally infiltrated the United States of America.
It's amazing. I mean, the answer to that is very easy to calculate simply from the numbers. But what was happening at the time was Russia had been perceived as invading and doing soft power gas diplomacy war in Central and Eastern Europe, primarily affecting Republican oil and gas interests in Georgia, in Azerbaijan, in the Balkans, where you had partnerships with Houston oil and gas companies, and there was a fear within the Republican donor establishment that Russia's hardball tactics and their sort of soft economic invasion through shutting off the gas and forcing the government to buy Russian gas at much more favorable to Russia terms was essentially impacting the Republican side of the economic stakeholder game in Washington. But Democrats were still playing nice with Russia at the time, and were still doing business with Russia at the time, or I should say Democrat-associated businesses. And you can, if you recall, that same election cycle, Medvedev was the president in Russia, and Obama was caught on a hot microphone after a debate, whispering into Medvedev's ear, "Tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election," meaning that Obama knew that he had to talk somewhat tough about Russia in order to get reelected because of the hawkish foreign policy establishment and needing their support, but that after he won the election, he could go back to Democrats doing business. If you remember, Hillary Clinton was doing business with Russia through Uranium One, and you still had this robust relationship through this Russian reset. What changed the game was when the Obama administration thought they could simply roll over Russia by orchestrating the Maidan coup in tandem with the internationalist Republican set. You had this sort of Obama administration, Victoria Nuland, Jeff Pyatt operation run through the embassy and the U.S. State Department in tandem with their British partners, with USAID providing $5 billion to the Ukrainian civil society organizations that organized the complete devastation of the Maidan Square, literally setting it on fire, surrounding the parliament and forcing the democratically elected president, Yanukovych, to flee. And then the Obama administration literally installed the next president in Ukraine, Yatsenyuk, without a vote. And I think they were expecting that Russia would simply eat that the way that Russia had eaten everything else. When what happened next ensued, it is what brought the Democrats into the fold with Republicans in a bipartisan posture towards Russia post 2014. Of course, what happened next was Crimea broke away, declared itself a part of the Russian Federation in a referendum vote, and the Donbass decided that it would be a breakaway state with an autonomous government, not respecting the new Obama-installed government in Kiev, forcing the U.S. to provide military funding to the Ukrainian government to recapture the entire eastern half of the state after those militants killed about 35,000 Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine. Russia stepped in and launched what we now call the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and here we are. But effectively, what changed the calculus was Soros Inc. Soros, Bill Browder, this whole investor set of Democrat limousine liberals who have hedge funds and private equity funds and alternative asset funds that have invested tens of billions of dollars in both liquid but oftentimes illiquid investments in Central and Eastern Europe and across Eurasia, which gets to the heart of the Russia hoax that's playing out right now. The bombshell that dropped last week was this classified annex that containing information known to the Central Intelligence Agency for 9 years and just discovered by the American people last week. These include emails, purported emails, from the Open Society Institute Eurasia Center. There was essentially a Russian hack of information in 2016 called DC Leaks, which quickly disappeared off the internet. And the CIA appeared to mine those leaks and found emails that were completely shocking, but including in the highlights of these emails of the Open Society Institute Eurasia Center were an admission that Hillary Clinton had approved a plan to vilify Trump by stirring up a fake scandal that Russia would be interfering in the election. This is in July 2016, mind you, right at the time that Hillary Clinton made her pivot publicly to accuse Trump, to turn the whole election on Russia. That she would make her first speech about it just weeks after. That they had no evidence that Russia actually was interfering in the election, but that they would deploy the Democrat-aligned digital cyber hoax firm CrowdStrike to, quote, do the media in the absence of any actual evidence, but that later in time, the FBI would come and pour oil on it. And that in the meantime, they would also declare that in the absence of any evidence, critical infrastructure, a threat to critical infrastructure would be declared as a menace to elections, which then catapulted us into this concept that DHS would declare on January 6, 2017, that critical infrastructure was, that elections were critical infrastructure, which then federalized elections. We're now living in the aftermath of that. Add that to the second and third order effects of RussiaGate. We now have federalized control of elections through the Department of Homeland Security, something all 50 states opposed at the time when this was declared, and it was all because of the RussiaGate hoax. I think that executive order has to be repealed in light of this as well. But just to put the button on this, and I'm sorry for taking so long, but those Open Society Institute Eurasia emails, the Open Society Institute is downstream of the George Soros hedge fund. George Soros met with Hillary Clinton while she was the Secretary of State on June 2nd, 2016. And who did he bring with him to the State Department to meet with Hillary Clinton? The head of the Open Society Institute Eurasia Center. A month before this, they had been working on this together, protecting George Soros's investments while George Soros was the largest campaign donor, the story, the now the origins of the hoax, they all fit together like a glove.
You know what's fascinating in listening to you describe that is how Donald Trump remains an aberration on their ability to control the public mind. Listening to you talk about that evolution and the success of marshaling not just money but public sentiment toward Ukraine is reflected in this Gallup poll I just talked about, the 2025 Newsmaker favorability rankings. And Volodymyr Zelensky comes in second, only to Pope Leo XIV, and he's far ahead of every other public figure. And that just illustrates to me the success of all of these enterprises, both governmental and non-governmental organizations, in manipulating the public mind, along with their either willing partners or easy marks, the mainstream media. And I think that's reflected in the favorability of Volodymyr Zelensky. By the way, I don't think you have to run. The point of these conversations for me isn't that you run to the other extreme and say Russia is definitely not trying to spy on the United States, or that, you know, Putin is the good guy and Zelensky is the bad guy in Ukraine. But I do think it shows how shallow the public's concept is and opinion is on these figures and these wars, and therefore how successful all of this manipulation is on our minds. But their one big failure is the inability to convince the public about Donald Trump.
Well, this is why internet censorship was such a big focus for them. And internet censorship through RUSSIAGATE is the predicate for it. I mean, that's a stunning statistic to the extent that that it's reflective of reality, that you have the Pope and Zelensky neck and neck there. Zelensky, of course, is now well over a year since it was supposed to be an election. Yeah, there's a 5-year election terms for president in Ukraine. Zelensky was elected in March 2019. It is now August 2025. He banned elections 3 years ago. Elections were supposed to take place last year. He may be you may have a new sort of royal family, crown prince. It could be the year 2085, and there's still democratically elected President Zelensky. He's banned 19 political parties, banned all independent media. It's a pretty incredible job that's been done there, but not unusual in any historical sense. These sorts of,
right.
You know, I mean, anytime you have a kind of useful foreign policy figure who is who's got the benefit of USAID and State Department and Internews and DOD civil media support, they can be deified. I have no problem with the Dalai Lama, for example, but it's worth noting that I think very few people knew that the Dalai Lama was being actively backed by the Central Intelligence Agency when he was being given Nobel Peace Prizes and being put on the cover of Time magazine as a sainted figure. This is a very common thing where we kind of Dalai Lama-ize anyone who's useful, and then the moment they become less useful, suddenly their sins are revealed. I'm old enough to remember when Osama bin Laden, for example, was gracing the front pages of American newspapers as a warrior on the road to peace, as he was being funded by the Central Intelligence Agency as part of the Mujahideen against the Soviets. But then, of course, times change. But the importance of controlling the media is absolutely critical to these folks, because it impacts the amount of funding that Congress allocates to support their war efforts, their propaganda efforts, their soft power influence efforts. It also impacts, of course, who people decide as president, and then the executive branch decisions. It impacts private philanthropy and the ability to mobilize NGOs. And this is why control over media was such a fixture in the fight around RUSSIAGATE. They used the idea that Russia had controlled hearts and minds on American social media as the justification, as the political and legal predicate to censor the internet. For the first time in internet history in America, you had wide-scale mass bannings of completely legitimate First Amendment protected speech by real American voices who are being mass reported to the tune of tens of thousands by State Department and Pentagon funded NGOs like the Hamilton 68 Alliance for Securing Democracy Project and the Atlantic Council, who were simply collating reams of Trump supporters, calling them Russian bots because they tweeted high frequency 50 or more times a day with anti-NATO talking points. That was the test that the Alliance for Securing Democracy and their out of the German Marshall Fund, which ran this Hamilton 68 project, they basically said, do you support Donald Trump's talking points on foreign policy? And do you tweet more than 50 times a day? Okay, you must be a bot. You must be a Russian bot. Mass report.
Right. Right.
Until they started reporting real people like the Baldwin brothers or one of the Baldwins, and it got too much even for Twitter.
You point out Zelensky's manipulation of elections and that it's not necessarily a historical aberration. I mean, so does Putin. We should point that out. Putin manipulates elections. But the point we're making is that Zelensky is not the Pope. And hell, we'll wait and see if the Pope is even the Pope. Mike Benz here with us. And I want to, before we go, talk to you for a minute about Jeffrey Epstein. And I think the way to do this in a concise manner, and that's the way I want to do it, Mike. I want to do it concisely because I feel like so much of this story is about the side issues, the salacious issues. It's rarely about what it's really about, in my estimation. So let's start with what it is not. This story is the one that has captured the mind and the attention of the left. When I'm around someone conversationally who is from the left, they want to talk about Epstein. Which is interesting to note in that it was totally off their news radar some 5 years ago. Cared nothing about it, knew nothing about it, and honestly still know nothing about Epstein. All they think of it is as another smoking gun to get Donald Trump. What it is not. I don't believe there is a client list that includes anyone like the name of Donald Trump. And I think my biggest piece of evidence or rationale, biggest piece of logic to support that is, are you telling me that a Biden administration and a Biden Department of Justice who did everything under the sun to take down Donald Trump, every piece of lawfare they could conjure up, would have sat on the smoking gun of Donald Trump's incriminating relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? That's just not the story, Mike.
100% correct. I think we actually had testimony from Ghislaine Maxwell reportedly that that Donald Trump had not done anything untoward in her presence. Now, of course, Democrats will argue that she is no longer a credible witness as she is sort of auditioning for a pardon, they will argue, and I think that argument is not without merit. The fact is Ghislaine Maxwell is in a very strange place given that she has been given such a heavy-handed sentence for appearing to help, Jeffrey Epstein or appearing to serve, thousands of women in this process for sex trafficking, and then the curious statement post-conviction now coming out of the Justice Department that the only end client for all these women was Jeffrey Epstein. It's hard to imagine one man could have that voracious an appetite, but I don't know. I guess I'm open-minded. If I would be impressed, but I think that the issue is the left, the Democrats have been trying to find an angle to get back cultural cleavage points that
credibility, a toehold, anything in the culture.
Right. As they've seen, voices like Joe Rogan, Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, that used to be kind of avant-garde tip of the spear for being able to sort of get soft support for Democrats and the like, and the fact that there's such overwhelming popularity for Trump on social media, and even I think in many pockets of traditional media, there's simply no longer this complete stigma that there was around the MAGA movement. And I think that they see how much it's dividing the Republicans, and so they think this can be a wedge issue. But I think you're right. There's simply no there on Trump. There is there's enough to talk about it. Trump does appear on the flight logs in 1993, traveling with Jeffrey Epstein. We know that Jeffrey Epstein did associate socially at the Mar-a-Lago Club in the 1990s, but that was 15 years before there was even the first plea deal struck with the Justice Department, and Trump kicked Epstein out before the conviction even happened. So,
and also, whether or not it's Donald Trump or Bill Gates or Bill Clinton or anyone else, knowing Jeffrey Epstein is not in and of itself incriminating. There is need for something more. And right now, in the public mind, any connection to Jeffrey Epstein itself is incriminating, but you have to ask deeper questions. And then there's the what is this story, Mike? And I only have a few minutes left, but I think you've been somebody who tells the truth on this and looks deeply. But I think that in the end, people always ask me about this story. All signs point to Jeffrey Epstein having deeper connections, a deeper purpose, and a deeper role than simply depravity. Depravity is part of his story, either enabled or put up with by the deeper elements of this story. And there is just too much there. Maybe circumstantial evidence, some direct, to point out that Jeffrey Epstein had connections to very powerful figures and very powerful organizations. Perhaps the FBI, perhaps the CIA, perhaps foreign intelligence. But that seems to be a big part of the story when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. And because of that, I'm pessimistic that we ever know the truth.
That's true. Hopefully our children and grandchildren will be getting the Epstein files like we got the JFK files earlier this year, but it does seem too soon. Unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case. I'm still going to be calling for it, but I think that exactly what you said is likely the reason that the easy answers that they could give us do not appear to be being pursued. For example, we don't know the results of a CIA name trace done on Jeffrey Epstein, a simple trace of all traffic documents, references for Jeffrey Epstein. We don't have the 21-month investigation into Epstein's intelligence ties done by the Justice Department between February 2019 and November 2020, in which the Justice Department specifically was told the people they investigated Epstein's intelligence ties and then simply put their findings in a bizarre footnote on page 244 of the 169-page report. That's something that Pam Bondi could get us the transcripts for those interviews and publish them immediately. We don't have that. The fact is Epstein was with these international intelligence ties pretty much his entire career, from his 20s until the day he died. Claimed to have Adnan Khashoggi as one of his marquee clients in the 1980s. Adnan Khashoggi was the CIA's middleman in the Iran-Contra scandal. He literally was the middleman between the U.S. and Israelis for the sales to Iran of illegal weapons. While he was essentially the right-hand man of every U.S. military contractor and the Saudi royal family, and then his money was being managed by Jeffrey Epstein in the 1980s, while Jeffrey Epstein had a fake passport claiming his residence was Saudi Arabia, the home of Adnan Khashoggi. And then you had the Southern Air Transport, the CIA proprietary airliner, literally a spin out of Air America, the CIA proprietary, that moved directly to Jeffrey Epstein's Columbus, Ohio in 1994, while Jeffrey Epstein had power of attorney over the Limited. The CIA airliner that was used to move guns and drugs and laundered cash to the U.S. Virgin Islands moved specifically to service the Limited, while Jeffrey Epstein had durable power of attorney, was the authorized signatory on every Limited document. So they basically, a CIA airliner that was servicing the U.S. Virgin Islands and Iran-Contra moves to service Jeffrey Epstein's company, and then Jeffrey Epstein goes and buys the island 2 miles away from the landing point of that CIA proprietary, which is the famous Little St. James. And then you had the Jeffrey Epstein having 17 visits to the Bill Clinton White House, while simultaneously Jeffrey Epstein is having 43 visits from the head of Israeli military intelligence, and then Simultaneously, the head of the prime minister of Israel at the same time, Bill Clinton, is the president, seeming to be an essential back channel during the Oslo Accords and during the Camp David Accords. And then you have Jeffrey Epstein claiming to be a co-founder of the Clinton Global Initiative, that it was his idea as Epstein was flying the president, Bill Clinton, around the continent of Africa on his private plane, while simultaneously securing these international deals and everything from the tech to the university space. This appears to me to be a facilitator, a broker of deals between foreign nation states and the U.S. government, as well as a financial support mechanism for both overt and covert activity done by the U.S. as well as international allied governments. And like many of those figures in history, they are controversial, they are checkered, they don't behave well in their personal life, and when they get in too much trouble, they end up being burned, as many assets and associated figures are. And I think what we watched in 2019 was the burning of Jeffrey Epstein.
We should clarify, the Limited that you're talking about is Limited Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secrets and many other shopping mall brands owned by billionaire Les Wexner, and Jeffrey Epstein maintained power of attorney over Les Wexner at some period of years in the, I believe, 1990s to early 2000s. And that description you just gave of they are checkered, their past, they are serviceable, you could pretty much apply that exact same formula to one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest relationships. That's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, Robert Maxwell, furthering those correlations and ties and circumstantial evidence that suggest we'll never know the truth when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. You get a lot of truth, though, by checking out Mike Benz, the executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. Check him out on X at Mike Benz with a Z Cyber. Thank you, Mike. It's always great to talk to you.
You too. Thanks, Will.
Okay. We have an update on Dildo Gate in the WNBA, plus I went viral in Ireland. Next on Will Cain Country. When you tell the truth, you become a breath of fresh air. You can even become a breath of fresh air in Ireland. It is Will Cain Country. And that country spans the Atlantic Ocean. Streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. All right, let's talk about Ireland, and then let's get our latest update from our beat reporter, the David Spunt of the WNBA tinfoil pack, coming up in just moments here on Will Cain Country. So, the other day I had the aforementioned Douglas Murray on the Will Cain Show, and we were talking about crime in Dublin and mass migration. And it got people's attention in Ireland. Here, watch. Ireland last year is seeing its biggest population surge since 2008, largely due to positive net migration. The country also seeing, by the way, a rise in crime. It's even more pronounced in the city of Dublin, where murder and assault attempts are surging. This from a city that was once one of the safest cities in the world. It now ranks among the top 10 most dangerous cities in Europe. So Ireland has uncontrolled migration, both legal and illegal, in that country. And it has experienced not just a rise in crime, but a loss in culture. Many of these, as we talked to Douglas Murray about, are mass migration waves from Africa or from Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And it is changing the culture of Ireland. And what I found fascinating, tinfoil pat in 2 days, is that you do something and weirdly you start seeing it get traction online. And next, I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's a bunch of Irish people talking about this segment. Okay, you'd say, well, yeah, you're talking about Ireland. Well, the truth is, if we're doing news in America on Ireland, we're really trying to apply it back to potential problems in the United States. That's the point. I mean, I recognize the limited interest somebody living in Missouri has on what's happening in Dublin. But the point is to talk about what's happening in Dublin, to say, hey, watch what happened here. Be careful what's going to happen at home. Never in my thoughts was, oh, somebody from Ireland will care about this, or that we're doing it at a level of depth that they're not already getting in Ireland. But in fact, we are. That was what was happening. It was all these Irish people talking about, wow, man, I always thought of Fox News as alt-right, but I've become increasingly aware that it's actually mainstream, meaning they'll tell the truth. Other people going, Fox is actually pretty good. That whole narrative is set to you by what is known as the legacy mainstream media in America, that Fox is all this crazy right. And then somebody say, well, they do lean to the right, but they will tell the truth. And then the long and short of it is, the commenters were all like, I wish local media would tell this story. We all are experiencing it as our life. But whatever their local media is, when I say local, national, but RTE News, I think, is the big one, maybe, in Ireland. They're like, they won't do this story. They won't talk about what's happening in Dublin. They won't talk about what's happening in Ireland. And man, did I find that fascinating. Not as just a pat on the back to us, but like you could live in a world where you literally have to get the truth from thousands of miles away because your local media thinks what? Oh, that'll be racist to tell the truth? Oh, that'll be xenophobic or jingoistic to suggest we should preserve Irish culture? GTFO, man. This is what we do. Like, this is who we are. This is Western civilization. This is what you protect. Don't pretend everything is the same. Not all cultures are the same. That's not controversial. That's factual. And if they're all the same, you might go, oh, some are better than others, or take from the parts that are better than others from others, and kind of improve the standard of living of human beings. I don't know. I just found it absolutely fascinating that they don't know that story, or they know it because they live it. They don't hear that story told in national media. All right, before we go today, we want to make sure we keep you updated on a rapidly moving story, a story that we think that we have owned here on Will Cain Country. Outkick and Clay Travis have done a great job as well, but there's really no one that holds a candle to Tinfoil Pat. He has been our reporter on the beat of Dildogate and the WNBA. So I turn it over now to Tinfoil Pat to give us the latest in this saga. Tinfoil.
Thank you, Will. So yesterday, the WNBA released a no-bag policy in order to combat this problem. And but Clay Travis also broke open a wide conspiracy. So we were questioning what exactly was going down. Clay Travis allegedly spoke to the leader of a movement known as the Green Dildo Group, who are going around doing this stuff at WNBA games. So
it's like anonymous, that hacker group.
Yes.
They're just
so we know the name.
God,
we know the name
funny.
of the person who was arrested in Atlanta. Is Delbert Carver, allegedly.
Delbert.
And
can we pause? Pause.
Yeah.
Right. If you ever meet a Delbert, wheels off.
Yeah.
Get ready. Get prepared.
It's gonna be
like
weird.
A green dildo on the court of the WNBA is the least of your potential outcomes when you're hanging out with Delbert.
Go ahead, Tim. It's gonna get weird.
Well, he may, according to this group, may not have actually been the person who threw the dildo. So
what?
He may have just
Delbert was a patsy.
Delbert.
He was a patsy.
That's what they're saying. He was a patsy.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. This is turning into JFK all over again. Oh my God.
Yes. Also, on the night of the 6th, there were actually 4 attempts, and only one was successful. So the one in LA hit. The 3 others failed.
Was it all in the
One
same
person
stadium,
was
you're saying, or across the league?
Across the league. 4 different cities, 4 different attempts. Only one was successful and reached the court.
Okay, I have questions. Can I get Delbert's number? Because you and me together, Delbert, forget about it. You guys remember the scene from Stripes? But you, Lee Harvey, that story about you and the cow, forget about it. You and me together, I want to hang out with you, Lee Harvey. I want to hang out with Delbert. Second, why would Delbert take the fall? Why would he willingly be the patsy for someone else?
Larger conspiracy.
The lime green dildo.
They claim he may have been coerced.
Here.
Yeah, he may have been coerced into taking the fall. So
coerced
that's
by
what.
Who?
You don't talk.
Coerced by the Green Dildo Society?
I mean, the police, security.
Coerced by the police.
Yeah.
Oh, under intense examination, he folded 10 minutes under the bright lights, and he was like, it was me, but it really wasn't me. Oh, Delbert, I'm liking you more and more every moment here. And then my last question. 4 attempts, only 1 success to launch a green dildo onto an WNBA court. Where were these other 3 dudes throwing it from? Are we talking about is the Green Dildo Society a bunch of noodle-armed dudes? Were you throwing it from I've seen WNBA games. I don't think it's full to the rafters. I don't think you're in the nosebleeds going, I can't get better seats, so I have to launch my Green Dildo from section 282.
I might get caught.
Do believe he could have gotten down closer. So how did they not reach the court?
Now, you might be onto something here, Will. So according to the leader of the group, roughly 600 members are part of it, and they're mostly crypto enthusiasts. So they're probably sitting around behind computers all day. They might not be the best shape athletically. Maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe they're good people. But yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, they are. It's all done comedically. It's not. It was just easy to mock the WNBA, and that's why they're doing it, allegedly. So,
all right, let's see if we can book somebody from the Green Dildo Society, Delbert or otherwise. This vast organization. So let's get on that, Tinfoil. Let's see if we can get a real interview here on this beat that you have owned. But let's get some first-person reporting as well. So thank you for that, Tinfoil Pat. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on Will Cain Country. We appreciate you hanging out with us. As always, we'll be back Monday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time live. Make sure you download the Cain on Sports episode. Comes out every Fridays. You can only get it by checking us out on Spotify or Apple. We'll see you next time.